Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. First of the month, time for another 4 Ways collaboration video where me and my 3 collaboration partners, Richard Raffin, Tomislav Tomasech, and Sam Angelo, each take the same project and make our own video. We take turns with a topic, and this time it was my idea, and I came up with the idea of a mortar and pestle. Never turned one before. I'm not a foodie, but I've got several relatives I think they could probably use it in the kitchen. So let's get started. We're gonna start with a block of wood about 5 inches square. You could go a little bit smaller, and then that's for the mortar. For the pestle, I've got a piece about 7 inches long and about 2 inches square. I wanted a contrasting wood, but the best I could come up with was this piece of walnut that has heartwood and sapwood, but I think it looked good. This base I've had since stated on it maple 2013, so it's plenty dry. We're going to make this an in-grain project, so it'll be very hard and dense when you go to use it. Okay, I'm using my little shop-made centering jig. I just get it equally around the sides. I'm going to mark at both ends. Any kind of hardwood would probably work fine. You don't want pine or softwood because you're going to be pounding the inside of this thing as you use it. So we're going to turn it between centers. You could do it side grain or end grain, but I think end grain is going to be best because it'll take the punishment better. Examine which end that I want to be the base. That's the part where I'm going to put the tenon on. I think that's going to be this end. And I'm going to use this multi-point center that I got to pound in. I have to mark it. I got between centers. I've lined up the marks. Alright, we're going to use our spindle roughing gouge to round this off. This is a little big for a skew for me to plane it off. And we'll get the speed up to about 1,000 until 1,100 until I knock off the edges. True up the bottom with a beating and parting tool. Okay. Somebody gave me this little jig for setting the diameter, so we're just going to go ahead and mark that. Now let's turn the tenon again using a beating and parting tool. Now I'm using a dovetail jaw, so I'm going to incline this just slightly. Got a nice clean shoulder, that'll work well. Just gonna knock that corner off there. Take this off, reverse it, put it in the chuck. Mount the chuck. Press in from the center, tighten it up, turn it around. Tighten it up some more. Before I start hollowing, I want to true it up. It's close but a little uneven. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch, very flat, C-fluted type of bowl gouge for this. Alright, my research says for a mortar about 4 to 6 inches across, it's 3 to 4 inches deep, so I'm going to make mine 3.5, so I'm just going to mark that so I'll kind of have that as a reference. 3.5. No, I think I'll go for 3 inches. That's going to be the depth, and the rest of this I'll have to be able to make the foot from. I'll keep a little rare earth magnet to show which pulley setting I'm on. I'm on the high setting for max speed, lowest torque, but I've got to change that. My experience showing when I'm doing heavy duty drilling, I've got to step it down to a different pulley ratio with a little higher, a little more torque. So let's make that adjustment. So now I've got it set on the 15 to 900 range to give me more torque. Slow the speed down to no more than about 500 as I drill 3 inches. Chips. This was green wood. I would have to clear it, I think, more often, but this is not too bad. Ingrains can be kind of tough to hollow. I think the easiest way is for me to use this shop-made square-inch scraper, about 3/4 of an inch by, I think, 5/16. And I'm not going to go all the way down the bottom. I'm going to round it, so I'm going to go hollow it down and then worry about shaping the bottom as I get closer. To speed up a little bit, maybe about 1,000. Got to lift the handle up. Conventional scraper, so let's adjust the tool rest appropriately. And I'm only going to take off just a little bit at a time. I think the rattling is, my lathe is not really fastened to this stand, which normally is not an issue. In this case, it causes a little bit of rattling the whole lathe, I think. I think I'm going to switch over to the larger lathe. I think I'm going to start the hollowing with the traditional in-grain hollowing with a spindle gouge, going from the center out until I get down until it won't handle it anymore. 1/2 inch spindle gouge. Walls thick, about 3/4 of an inch on this whole project. Slow, but I take my time. This is the easiest way, I think. Ooh. Hot shavings. I'm going to put on a glove. I know some people say never wear a glove, but I think it depends on what you're turning and where your hand is. There are limitations using a spindle gouge for hollowing. A depth of about 1 7/8 over the tool rest is about as far as you can reasonably go before you get too much chatter or risk of breaking the tool off. So it's time to switch to a different solution. So I'm going to go back to using a scraper, but I'm going to shift to a different tool rest, one I rarely use. It's a box rest, but normally I don't make boxes this deep. But this will give me some additional support. Before I go deeper, I'm going to clean up those walls all the way down to the depth that I've hollowed. Holding my finger down on the tool rest, keep it flat. Lining this up with a bed waste, just going to go straight in.
probably get a little bit of vibration on this, but I'm going to come down to the end and just lift the handle and rely on the support out on the end. This is a pretty long rest, so probably not as strong as I'd like it to be. 10,000 RPM. Gravity even lifting up. Okay.
So here's where I am. I've got it chucked back here. I've got the 3/4 inch walls, and then I've got this hole in the middle that's now down to only a little over a 1/2 inch. So it's time for me to start sweeping this radius right here to get a rounded bottom.
So this is kind of a trains, boats, and planes on different tools. So I've got a really thick, 1/2 inch thick scraper, so I have to lower the tool rest, so I'll still be cutting on center as I make that sweep down at the bottom. Wow, I'm almost there.
I'm having some challenges getting a uniform, even bottom with it, with stretching out this far. I'm going to switch to a negative rake scraper in order that I can keep this flat, and not have to worry about lifting the handle. And hopefully that'll make it easier to make a transition. Pivot it around.
Takes. That's got it.
I look at where I am and I've realized that this appears to be too deep for me, and I wished I recognized earlier, because I'm going to have to cut off maybe at least 3/4 of an inch, because if I think of this as the pestle, it's just too deep. So I'm going to chop off about at least 3/4 of an inch, and then we'll pick it up again. So using a thin parting tool, I'm going to take off about 3/4 of an inch. Okay, I knew it was scorching a little bit, but I can clean that up. So we're just going to round over the inside, round over the outside, then we're going to start shaping the outside. So we'll get a 1/2 inch spindle gouge to do this round over. It happens to have a little bit longer bevel. Now let's clean up some of that scorching. All right, I'm going to use a 2-inch power sander and get a little bit at the bottom, and then I'll come in by hand and get the side walls. Slow the speed down a little bit, maybe half turning speed. All right, now I need to start thinking about shaping the outside. So here is the bottom. I need to give myself 3/4 of an inch at the base. So let me go ahead and mark that. And I'm going to taper into that point. And Here's where the slope, right here, I think. Let me check that. Right about here's where the slope begins. So that's when I'll start tapering down into this slot I'm going to make here. With the skew, making a V cut right there. Get the speed back up a little bit from sanding. I've got a couple of knots, so that knot is ingrained, so that's giving me a hard time right here. But at least I've got it marked. So let's go ahead and come down here a little bit. The base is going to be a little bit smaller than this, so I can take that down a little bit. And I'll use that 1/2-inch spindle gouge. And let's just start. Maybe I can get rid of some of this knot. Taper it in. And then I'll start tapering it down from this side. Now I'm going to round over the bottom. Let's go ahead and do that. Have to think about any embellishment down here. Okay, where I've got that knot coming through, I've got a little bit of a tiny void. I want to go ahead and patch that up. So I'm going to, before I use some CA glue, I'm going to go ahead and put on a little finish so it doesn't, any loose CA doesn't stain the surface that I can't fix, I can't sand out. So I'll just use a little friction polish in there all the way around because that CA tends to go everywhere. So let's drip in just a little bit of thin CA into those voids there. And now we're just going to reach down and grab some of the shavings. Actually, I think I want to use some darker sawdust. I'm going to use some coffee grounds or something. Yeah, looks like coffee grounds, so let me just kind of rub that in. Sand it in. Okay, now I want to smooth this transition. I'm going to use a skew. Because of that 40-degree included angle, you got to raise the tool rest up a little bit, so you'll be planing up here near about the 11 o'clock. So just anchor the tool, ride the bevel, lift it till it cuts. Getting that end grain. Use a spindle gouge and just kind of chamfer the end a little bit. And then come back. Now I can drop the tool rest. Tool just a little bit. Kind of round over this. All right. That's looking good. I want to go ahead and sand this before I do some texturing to kind of decorate it a little bit. So I'll just hit it with a little, up to about 220, starting with 120. Slow the speed down a little bit. 180. Okay, now before I do a little texturing, I'm going to put a tiny little V-groove here. And the reason why I do that will be obvious, but it's in a moment. But basically it is in order that I can reverse chuck this. Let's get the speed up a little bit. I want to make this tiny little V-groove right there. And then I think I'll make another little, well, I'm not going to make a V-groove down here until I actually finish the texturing. So bring that out. And just going to bring it around to about there. Let's see what that texture looks like. Okay, it's too uniform a pattern for me, which means I need to lift the tool and insert it back in a little bit. Slow the speed down just a little bit, so just okay. Now it's got a much more random pattern, which is good. So I'm going to now put a little bead right there at the bottom of that. Get the speed up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and put burn ring on that in both of those grooves. So let's get the speed up a little bit. Bend it over the back. Get a little friction on it. There we go. And this will absorb a little more finish, that texturing will, so this band will darken a little bit when I put some finish on it. And I'll be using some boil linseed oil type of finish on here, since this is going to be a kitchen product. And I think I want to put a little bead here on the base. So let's do that with a point tool. At least get it started. Put it right about here. And right about there. Drop the handle, bring it around. Drop the handle, bring it around. And that's got it. And I want to come in from underneath that bead to leave the bead proud. So I'm going to use a 3/8 inch detail gouge. Get that bottom clean. Okay, that looks good. Need to just do a little bit of a shear scrape here. Smooth up some tool marks. Okay. And maybe clean up that bead just a little bit. And then I want to come in underneath the bead from this side. Okay, that looks good. Tan that up a little bit, and then I'll be able to reverse chuck this. I'm going to use a little abrasive paste on the inside. The boiled linseed oil and the wax will help get in the pores to make it easier to clean. Actually, I think I'm going to put a little walnut oil finish on it. And then coat it with a wax finish. Get it into this texturing. So this is some beeswax and boiled linseed oil finish that I'm putting on it. Might have to be refreshed from time to time. Go ahead and take this off. Take the chuck off. Now if I've calculated correctly, the outside diameter in that little burn ring I made, these large 5-inch jaws should grasp this right there in that groove. Maybe I made it a little large, but maybe not so much that it'll damage it. I'm going to tighten it up too much. I think that's all it's going to take. That's snug. Clean up the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up some tailstock support initially as I make some of that excess wood go away. Okay. Remove some of this excess. Now I'm going to switch to a 3/8 inch detail gouge. Before I get rid of this middle support, I think I want to maybe put a couple of V grooves down the bottom just for decoration. So I'll just come in here like this. Drop, roll it over. Drop, roll it over. And I might use the flush cut saw to finish cutting that nib off. And there we go. Get that back. Maybe come in there with a shear scraper just to kind of clean that up just a little bit. Getting a little bit of rattle here. Let's see if the chuck's coming loose or what. I don't know. Just clean up that bottom a little bit more. Whoa. It's gotten loose. Let's tighten it up. When you hear a noise, you better investigate. Okay. And let's just double check, make sure that's going to be flat. Yep, that's flat all the way across. I think I want to come in here and just get under that bead just a little bit with this little notch. Alright, remove this. I'll put a final coat. I've sanded it. I'll put the final coat of finish on it after I finish burning my name in it. And that did well. That didn't really leave any marks, so that's good. There's the mortar. Now let's do the pestle. Alright, gonna take this piece of walnut and gonna turn it between centers, put a tenon on it to make it easy to shape the end, the business end. Use a larger tool rest. Always make sure it's not going to rub. All right, going to use a spindle roughing gouge. Okay, looks like I've got it round pretty much. I've got to decide whether my normal jaws will hold this or I got to use something smaller. I think I'm going to have to use something smaller. Yep, so I'm going to use my 40 millimeter jaws. So let's go ahead and put a tenon on here. Put it between center, put it in the chuck, tighten it up. Bring up the tailstock support to center it before I get it finally tightened. Okay. Alright, still got a couple of rough spots on it, so let me go back and touch that up just a little bit of bark with a spindle roughing gouge. Alright, let's use the spindle gouge to start rounding this over, just basically like a big bead, but the key is I've got to match this profile to the bottom of the mortar as best I can. I've got to remove that little bit of damage from the tailstock, live center. The bottom of this is fairly flat, so I want this somewhat flat but round on the edge, if that makes sense. I guess maybe like a big round sphere. Before I remove that final, I want to figure out what kind of shape I'm going to put all the way down up for the handle. I think I'm going to put a little ball here on the end, so let's make a little V groove with a skew for what that ball is going to look like. This is going to be where it's going to be parted off. And then that's going to be the ball handle. Alright, so let's use the spindle gouge to kind of round this over. Now I'm going to shape this handle down into that bead. Alright, let's just switch to a skew to get a nice planing cut. Okay, I've got this sanded. Now all I need to do is remove this nub on the end. So let's Okay, now just sand up that end. I'll start with a little coarser grit. All right, finish up with a little 220 grit. Sand with the grain. And use a little abrasive paste. Get in those pores. I think I can probably rub a little walnut oil on there now, friction some of it in. I think I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes to kind of absorb. All right, got it pretty much finished with that walnut oil. Now it's time to part it off. I need to shape the this bead a little bit more, make a big deep V cut. All right, let's take a flush cut saw and saw that off. Okay, and a little hand sanding there, or put that on a sanding mandrel, and we'll be good. And there we go. Yeah, that feels good in the hand. Grass mat like this, either way, like that. Yeah. Then okay.
If you've used a mortar and pestle, or if you've turned one, please share your thoughts in the comments below. This was my take on this month's four-way collaboration project. Be sure to watch the videos of my collaboration partners, Richard Raffin, Tomislav Tomasec, and Sam Angelo, to see a completely different version of the same project. And remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear?